Right. The last thing is to create a communication process, the last sort of part of your framework. So you've got your data stewards, you've got some sort of repository for all the content, and now you need some communication process to support what we call just-in-time data governance, right? So how do people interact with this content, right, and interact, with the overall process in your institution? So it should, and this is a bit of an advanced thing, but support the data request process. So if people, while they're doing data requests or while people are answering questions about data or looking at data, if they're interacting with your knowledge base, if they're interacting with governance, right, then they're going to continue to add to the content and get the answers they need when they need it, and it'll grow with every question being asked. But it also should support your data steward activity, right? So this is where the real just-in-time thing comes in. So if I'm someone who's looking to answer, trying to find some information on data definitions so I can build my own report in self-service, and I can't figure it out, like it doesn't really pay to wait, for this to come along for some committee to meet later. So I need that answer now. So how do I interact? So let's talk about that. What do we mean by just-in-time data governance? So we have a couple sessions on this, actually 2 different sessions, hour-long sessions, if you want to dive into the whole detail of just-in-time data governance and how it fits in the data request process and tricks to structure it. But one of the most common mistakes that people make is they set up a data governance and they define a stewardship committee, and then they determine that the best way for that committee to interact with everything is through meetings, right? So they get together with everybody in one room and they hypothetically review data definitions, or they review hypothetical data definitions, right? In terms of, like, there's not actual questions being asked, or just like thinking about terms off a list or whatever. And that's a pretty big waste of time for most of the people, as well as a not very effective way to get good answers and to get answers timely, right? So the better way to think about this is to take this just-in-time approach, that there's questions that are being asked and answered every day on your campus, and is governance part of that? Like, do the people who need information or are looking at information or asking questions, can they find the advice or the resources they need, right? And this is an important point, that data governance, it's not a project. This is not something that you design as a document that gets put on a shelf. It's something that's a part of, a simple, hopefully, and small, hopefully, part of day-to-day tasks for people interacting with data. So think of it as, just-in-time data governance is a practical approach to implementing data governance directly into your existing processes. So the way people request data, the way people review data, the way people learn about data, the way people ask about data, all that kind of stuff, the way people build things and document things, like have governance be a part of that process as they do it, and have that be facilitated within the framework. So the goals of this is, to give people access to the information they need to use the data appropriately and effectively when they need it, to support direct and immediate involvement of all necessary data stakeholders where needed in your data process, to give users ways to report problems or request information when it comes up, to create processes that foster collaboration, communication, and sharing between people so that people aren't siloing all their knowledge, create tools that notify and alert people when there are changes to data that have impact on their work, or changes to definitions or policies or things like that. And then focus on facilitating the use of data, not stopping the use. So, how do we, there's also just-in-time importance around stopping, right? You can't have access to the data, or no, you're not supposed to share that, right? And there are things that you can do around stopping. But if you think about use and how to facilitate that, it's very helpful. And then lastly, you also want to think about keeping it simple, which may seem like an oxymoron, or if that's the right phrase, from what I've said, because this might seem kind of complicated, but you can do this in simple ways, right? You don't have to have incredibly complicated workflows. You can have things that are really just about, who is the right person I have to ask at this point in time, and how do I get a hold of them, and how do I notify them? And if you're doing it on your own, you can do this with just a contact list or whatever. But if you have a workflow process like we have in our tool, it can facilitate that process.